YouTube. So you want to know why high carbohydrate diets do not cause insulin resistance. Fair enough. I'm going to show you. 2022, this was something people posted about all the time on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and that is insulin resistance. It was this little hype words that people like to use, not necessarily to sound smart, but a lot of times to sell you something. And usually it was to sell you the only diet that works. And the only way it works is if you buy their book or subscribe to all their stuff, right? That's a lie. So I'm going to show you why high carbohydrate diets are totally fine and they're not going to cause insulin resistance. So first of all, we have to understand what is insulin resistance. And I'm not going to begin to act like I'm an expert in diabetes, because the moment you think you're an expert in diabetes and insulin, I promise you, you will find something else out that blows your mind. But we're going to keep it very simple and by the book with what is insulin resistance. This is the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases. What is insulin resistance? You can read it right here, but basically think of it like your body has switches, right? And these switches have to be turned on for your body to take up glucose from your blood. So if you're someone that is sensitive to insulin and you're healthy, everything's working the way it should, your pancreas sends out the insulin your body needs, and those switches just flip on really easy, right? But if you're insulin resistant, those switches are harder to turn on, right? So your body's putting out the insulin and those switches are barely moving, so your body puts out more insulin, finally puts out enough insulin, those switches turn on and it takes up the glucose from your blood. So imagine it like it's a switch that's worn out. You've ever had a light switch that just won't turn on, or it feels like it's rusted or something, you know? So this is the same thing. And the longer you do this, the longer you're in this insulin resistant state, the harder it's going to be for that light switch to turn on and off, right? And it's going to take more and more insulin. That's what insulin resistance is, basically. I definitely encourage you to look through this page. This is a great page to look through. I think if you just Google what is insulin resistance, this will probably come up. Here's another good page on the CDC's website. Do you have insulin resistance? You know, most places are going to say you can't look at someone and tell if they have insulin resistance. I will admit a lot of these people talking about it on the internet will say you can. I tend to agree with them that you can take a good guess. And that's basically because a lot of these factors that you have to have, I think it's on this page, are things you can see, like obesity, overweight, physical inactivity, a history of heart disease or stroke, you know, someone that has PCOS, things like that. So, so how do you find out if you have insulin resistance? If you're just kind of clueless on it and you want to really dive into it, the first thing is a blood test. Now, it's not going to tell you exactly whether or not you have insulin resistance. You're not going to know 100%. But the four things you can look for are your fasting glucose levels. So high blood sugar levels, that's a big one, obviously, because that means your insulin's not working the way it should. Triglycerides, this is a key factor for a lot of other different things. So this is really where it starts to get unhealthy. But that's a key one. High LDL, which is your bad cholesterol, and low HDL, which is your good cholesterol. Those are excellent markers for it as well, because those are, as you know, metabolic markers. What causes insulin resistance? So what causes insulin resistance? We'll get back to that. But before we talk about what causes the insulin resistance, let's look at what some of these studies say about high carbohydrate diets. So first of all, you have to understand what someone means by a diet. Now, if it's a diet and you're starting a diet, well, what are you trying to accomplish? You're either trying to accomplish you're going to maintain your weight. You feel that weight is healthy. You're in a healthy state and you want to keep it there. This diet's going to do that. It's going to keep your weight steady. Or you're trying to lose weight, not necessarily body fat, but obviously you prefer body fat. You're trying to lose weight, right? So that's the two type of diets that, you know, what you're trying to accomplish. So if you're doing a high carbohydrate diet, as I'm always going to tell you, calories are king. So calories is what matters. So if you're doing a high carbohydrate diet, obviously the opposite of that would be low carbohydrate. And we're going to assume that the calories are the same in those two diets, which is lower than, the calories you're expending. So you're in a calorie deficit. So let's look at this first study. There's a bunch. I'm going to go through these really quickly. There's way more than this. I mean, you can go to Google Scholar and find tons of studies. You'll be very hard to find a study that says high carbohydrate diets are not healthy. If they are, it's probably because calories are not equated for most of the time. So you can take a look at that. But so this study is the first one. Jump to the conclusion here. Neither diet offered a significant advantage when comparing weight loss to the other metabolic parameters over a 12-week period. However, considering the great improvement in blood insulin, so this is showing that a low carbohydrate diet, which is 25%, might be more favorable long term for triglycerides, but for weight loss, there was no difference in the two diets that they looked at. So that's the first one. That's a little bland. Let's try another one. Okay, so this one is on a diet with high carbohydrates, and then it's in type 2 diabetes. Okay, so both groups had similar weight loss over 1 year and comparable improvement in body fat, waist circumference, blood pressure, HDL, A1C, and fasting glucose and insulin. So that one's pretty straightforward. High carbohydrate diet, it's fine. But again, calories are equated for here. Let's check out this one. What was this one? Again, this might be the exact same study. Let's see. Yeah, so the recent data suggests that high carbohydrate diet causes no deterioration in glycemic control and lipid profile, specifically triglycerides and HDL. Then it has a similar effect as a low carbohydrate diet if it's composed with high fiber, which that makes sense. So again, goes with what we're saying. This one's pretty cool. Metabolic effects of weight loss on very low carbohydrate diets. So this is just like super low carbohydrate diets with high carbohydrate diets. So let's see. They resulted in similar weight loss again and again. Then overall, both diets had similar improvements for a number of metabolic risk markers. All these. So the reason I keep bringing up these metabolic risk markers is similar to what I was talking about before. If you have insulin resistance, a lot of these metabolic markers are going to be off the charts. So that's the first thing to see, because when you're insulin resistant, that's what happens first is your metabolism and these metabolic markers, they go off the chain. And these are showing you that as long as you're dieting correctly, as in not over-consuming calories, it doesn't matter if it's high carbohydrate or low carbohydrate. Let's see if there's some more. Here's another one. Both diets achieved substantial weight loss and reduced HbA1c and fasting glucose. The low carbohydrate diet, which was high in, achieved greater improvements in the lipid profile. So this could be an effective strategy. So for this particular study, the lipid profile was better with a low carbohydrate diet, but both of them had a substantial weight loss and reduced A1C and fasting glucose. So, I mean, fasting glucose, that's directly affecting your insulin resistance. So that's a good one. Here's another study. This one is a little bit different. This one is actually about renal function. Is the renal? Yeah. So this one's about renal function. This study provides preliminary evidence that long-term weight loss with a very low carb diet does not adversely affect renal function compared with a high carb. So I wanted to throw that in there because I hear a lot of people talking about protein intake and carbohydrate intake having some kind of effect on their kidneys. Apparently not. So here's a couple talking about basically exercise and high carbohydrate diets, essentially why high carbohydrate diets are going to be better for someone that is, we'll say, an elite athlete. You can check that one out. This is the other one. So this is about metabolic responses. Let's see. So a low carbohydrate diet reduces both performance and total aerobic energy during supermaximal exercise. So why this is important is if you are on a diet that is with more higher carbohydrates, let's say you're comparing it to a low carbohydrate diet, all calories are equal. The one with the higher carbohydrates, that's going to push you to have more performance in the gym and a better aerobic energy. So that could lead to you not just having better gains for someone that's wanting to look physically better, wanting to look more attractive or whatever, but it is actually going to push you to burn more calories in the gym, or at least make it easier mentally and on your body to achieve that. So that's a pretty big pro in my opinion. High carbohydrate diet remains evidence-based choice for elite athletes to optimize performance. This one, it's the same thing. Yeah, so this is essentially the same thing. High carbohydrate diets are going to be beneficial for exercise. And then let's see. This one's cool. So this one's in diabetic men. Again, high carbohydrate diet with generous amounts of fiber is maybe the best treatment of choice for diabetic patients that require less than 30. So there is a caveat to this one, that if you're not yet insulin resistant, so you're not diabetic, and I'm not giving you diabetic advice, but this is essentially saying, if you're not too far gone, a high carbohydrate diet is still fine, as a diet of choice. Now, the next thing I want to show is spreadsheets, because I love spreadsheets. So these are two different diets with almost this is the total amount of calories here, total amount of calories here, 2,450. And this is just an example. A low carbohydrate diet, we'll say protein's the same, and the low carb and the high carb comes out to 800 calories. Fats, if it's a low carb, your fat's probably gonna be higher, so I put 150, and then carbs at 75. Over here, fats 75, carbs 2. So my point is, this is not equating for the TEF of this food. So if your calories are essentially the same, and you look at these two diets on paper, you need to be asking yourself, which one am I going to adhere to more? And furthermore, could I use both diets? That's what I do personally. I do high carbohydrate diet 4 to 5 days out of the week, and the other days of the week I do a low carbohydrate diet, just because I can tell my body's craving those fats for whatever, maybe hormonal purposes. There's a lot of reasons why your body might be craving fats, but eating a lot of carbs, even if your calories are lower, you can still have some effects that you might not enjoy, like water retention, things like that. And then again, going back to the insulin resistance, you want to be sure that your calories are as low as they should be on a high carbohydrate diet. It's easy to accidentally go over. I have noticed that with a lot of clients. Now, a lot of people, again, back to the people that are really big on carnivore diets, saying fats don't make you fat, which is the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard, but it's on Twitter every day. It's like their favorite thing to say. And when you're in a low carbohydrate diet, yes, you're going to burn a lot of fat. You have to. That's sort of like the big selling point on it. But you're also going to be storing a lot of fat. Okay? Your body's going to store this fat way quicker than it's going to store carbohydrates. Now, on the flip side, if you're on a high carbohydrate diet, you're going to be burning less fat, but you're going to be storing less fat as well. That's why this doesn't really matter. It's sort of a wash. All right? What matters is the calories. Again, energy balance, aka calories, determine the amount of fat you lose. You can try to sell it to someone, and that's sort of that's the big selling point, are these carnivore diets that I absolutely hate. And a lot of these people on Twitter that just want you to buy their books and subscribe to their emails and give them more money and more money, they're telling you, oh, low carbohydrate, you're going to burn more fat. Yeah, but they don't understand the science that you're actually storing more fat as well. And the amount of fat that you store and burn is still going to be based off of calories. And then, of course, you always have to remember that fat is always being burned and stored at the same time. And less than 2% of adipose fat originates from carbs. That's why you can say that when you eat these carbs, very little is actually stored as fat. Now, one reason that keto works is because it quickly works, visually, and a high carb diet doesn't. So when you're on a keto diet with low carbs, your body's first going to use all that glycogen in your muscles. So the more muscle mass you have, the quicker you're going to look like you shrinked up, the more weight you're going to lose. So when people say, oh, that's water weight, yeah, they're kind of right. That is a lot of water weight that you're losing on a low carbohydrate diet. So that's one reason it works and gets sold easily to people, is because it works visually, really quickly. It's another reason people like to use it for photo shoots and things like that. If you need to drop water, low carbohydrates is the way to go. But long term, for a lot of people, a high carb diet may be the way to go, but you're not going to visually see it working as quickly as keto. So you can't get discouraged. And again, more than anything, pick a diet that you can adhere to. You don't have to pick one or the other. You can do like I do and a lot of my clients, which is we do a high carbohydrate 4 or 5 days a week, and then low carb the other. Or it might be low carb 5 days a week and do high carb 2 days a week. And you have to figure out what you can adhere to mentally. And that's the same thing for food choices. Like if you want to do the high carb diet and have 5, 6 Rice Krispie treats a day, that's awesome. Go for it. But if those Rice Krispie treats are going to lead you into eating Little Debbie cakes and Pop-Tarts and all this other shit that you shouldn't be eating, then yeah, you probably shouldn't pick that diet. But it's not the high carbs that's doing that's leading you out of it. It's your choices. And it's the overconsumption of calories that's going to be leading to the diet not working. It's not the high carb diet itself. Okay, so that's why you shouldn't say that, because someone else might adhere to a high carb diet and it's going to work. So you can't say a high carb diet doesn't work. It just doesn't work for you because you can't adhere to that diet. That's a big difference. And the biggest point here, other than adhering to the diet, is if you do not pick the diet that you can adhere to and sustain, you will put the weight back on. I mean, there's a ridiculous amount of studies showing that you'll put the weight back on if it's not a diet you can adhere to. If it's something that you're miserable and you hate, you're not gonna keep the weight off. So keep that in mind. Now, last thing, I saved the two best studies for last. So this one is a comparison of high fat and high protein diets with high carbohydrate diets in insulin resistant obese women. So this is women that are already insulin resistant, and these are the two diets they used. Let's see if we can find the results. All right. So if you read through the results, as it says here, body weight, waist circumference, triglycerides all decreased with all three diets. So it essentially decreased with all diets. So, but you will see that essentially when you are insulin resistant, you shouldn't push the carbohydrates too high. You shouldn't lean on those carbohydrates. In this specific study, if I'm not mistaken, there was a lot of variance in the carbohydrates. So it's not necessarily they were under consuming calories like they should have. But there are studies out there that you can look up and see what happens on these different diets when someone is already insulin resistant, which is kind of a different ballgame once you get to that point. Then this is just a really in-depth study here. Similar weight loss with low or high carbohydrate diets. There was no significant difference. And then furthermore, significant decreases in body fat and waist-to-hip ratio were seen in both groups. Fasting plasma, insulin, cholesterol, triglycerides, everything looked about the same. And here's the key point that I want to drive home pretty hard is the results of this study show that it was energy intake and not nutrient composition that determined weight loss in response to low energy diets over a short time period. Energy intake. If you intake too much energy, aka too many calories, that's energy toxicity. That's like filling up your car with gas and then going on the inside and spraying gas all over your car seats. Like, nothing good's going to come of that. Your car has no idea what to do with that. Like, that's just the same thing with your body. If you eat too much food, no matter what the composition, whether it's too much protein, too much carbs, too much fats, whether it's healthy fats or, if it's McDonald's, it doesn't matter. It's the fact that you're overeating the calories. Your body doesn't know what to do with it. And all of these things here you see that improved, that's the things that are going to get screwed up when you overeat calories. Is the glucose, the insulin, cholesterol, triglycerides. Triglycerides. And I would bet that if you're someone that wants to, let's think of this sort of reverse engineer this. How would you become insulin resistant? If you wanted me to make you insulin resistant, what would I tell you to do? I would tell you not to exercise. I would tell you to eat as many calories as you can from anything. It doesn't matter if it's protein, fats, or carbs, just too many calories. And just wait and do that consistently. And then once you're over those calories, just hit carbs hard. Hit carbs all day long to the point that your body has no idea what to do. So if you're under eating your calories like you should be in a diet, carbs are not your concern. They're not going to cause insulin resistance. So if you have any questions on this, or you have any thoughts or theories, or you think I got something wrong, or maybe there's a study I missed that would be interesting, feel free to leave a comment. I would love to see it. Thanks.